It all started with an innocent conversation over dinner, an evening that should have been like any other. The room was bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, their flickering flames casting delicate shadows along the walls. A soft hum of jazz played in the background, filling the air with a sense of ease I hadn't felt in a long time. The rich aroma of roasted garlic and freshly baked bread lingered between us, making everything feel almost cinematic, as though we had stepped into a scene crafted for perfect intimacy. Then he spoke the words that would change everything. "I've been thinking about something," my husband said, his voice carefully measured, his fingers absently toying with his fork. He avoided my gaze, his movements controlled but betraying something just beneath the surface. A hesitation, a tremor that made my breath hitch. I paused mid-bite, my curiosity piqued. "What is it?" I asked, offering a reassuring smile, unaware of the storm that was about to crash into our quiet evening. He exhaled deeply, finally looking up. "I want us to try something different. Something exciting." A soft laugh escaped me, light and unbothered. "Different? Like what? A new vacation spot? A hobby?" His eyes held mine now, steady and unwavering. "No, something more intimate. I was thinking about you spending a night with someone else." For a moment, the world stilled. The soft clink of silverware, the distant murmur of jazz, even the rhythmic rise and fall of my own breathing, it all faded into an oppressive silence. I blinked, convinced I had misheard him. "Excuse me?" My voice trembled, the weight of disbelief pressing into my chest. "It's not what you think," he rushed to explain, leaning forward, his tone urgent but controlled. "It's just a fantasy. A harmless experiment. Something new to spice things up, to bring us closer." His words felt foreign, each syllable slicing through the foundation of everything I thought I knew about us. My mind raced, colliding with unspoken fears. Had I not been enough? Was this a test? Or worse, had I already failed one? "You're serious," I finally managed, my tone sharper than I intended. He nodded, his expression open, searching. "I've read about couples doing it. It's not uncommon. We'll set rules, boundaries. It'll be safe." Safe. The word echoed hollow and mocking. How could something like this ever feel safe? My instinct screamed to reject it outright, to push the absurdity away and pretend this night had never happened. But then doubt crept in, insidious, quiet. Was this his way of saving something between us? Or was it the beginning of something that would unravel us completely? "You don't have to decide now," he said softly, sensing my turmoil. "Just think about it." The rest of the evening unraveled into a blur. The once warm meal turned cold. The jazz in the background dulled into nothingness. My thoughts churned relentlessly, a storm with no reprieve. And later, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I wondered, was this an invitation to something deeper, or the first crack in the foundation of everything we had built? When the night arrived, the doorbell rang, sharp and decisive, cutting through the fragile silence of the room. My chest tightened as I turned to my husband. He offered me a reassuring smile, his calm demeanor unsettling against the unease twisting inside me. He walked toward the door, each step measured, deliberate, as though rehearsed 100 times. I remained frozen on the couch, my hands clasped tightly together, my knuckles turning white against my skin. Then the door swung open. The man standing there was taller than I had imagined. His broad shoulders filled the doorway with an unshakable presence. As he stepped inside, his movements were smooth, almost predatory, each step carrying an effortless confidence that sent a shiver down my spine. He wore a crisp white shirt that clung to his frame, dark jeans that fit as though tailored precisely for him. But it wasn't his appearance that unsettled me, it was the way he carried himself, the quiet, knowing authority in his gaze, as though he had already claimed the space around him. "Welcome," my husband said warmly, extending a hand. The man's handshake was firm, deliberate. And even as he exchanged pleasantries, his eyes flicked toward me, taking me in with a gaze that lingered just a beat too long. "And this must be her," he said, his voice deep, smooth as velvet but edged with steel. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "Yes," my husband confirmed, glancing at me with an encouraging nod. "This is my wife." The pause that followed stretched just a second too long. I felt exposed beneath his gaze, vulnerable in a way I hadn't anticipated. I forced a polite smile, my voice barely above a whisper. "Nice to meet you." He grinned, a slow, deliberate smile that never quite reached his eyes. "The pleasure is all mine." The room seemed to shrink, the air heavier now, charged with something unspoken. My husband, seemingly oblivious to the shift, gestured toward the living room, inviting the man to sit. I perched at the edge of the couch, my body taut, every muscle wound tight with an unease I couldn't shake. They spoke lightly, their conversation drifting through mundane topics: sports, travel, business. My husband's laughter filled the space, effortless, carefree. Meanwhile, my own thoughts tangled in knots of uncertainty, my mind racing through all the unknowns of the night ahead. Then, the man's eyes flicked to me again, lingering just long enough to unsettle. And when he spoke, his voice was smooth, assured. "You're even more beautiful than he described." The compliment landed like a dart to my chest. Heat crept up my skin, though I wasn't sure if it was from flattery or discomfort. I glanced at my husband, searching for his reaction. He simply smiled, as though this had all gone exactly as he had envisioned. "I told you," he said lightly. "She's incredible." The man's grin widened. "That she is?" The exchange felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold before me. My mind screamed at me to say something, to stop this before it could begin. But the words caught in my throat, paralyzed by the weight of the moment. Instead, I reached for the glass of water on the table, my fingers trembling as I took a slow sip, desperate to steady myself. Then my husband stood. "I'll let you two get acquainted," he said casually, as if he were merely stepping out of the room for a moment instead of leaving me alone with a stranger who made my pulse hammer. Panic shot through me. My breath hitched, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled from my lips. "Wait, where are you going?" My voice was sharper than I intended, laced with something raw and unguarded. He turned to me, his expression calm, steady, almost reassuring. But nothing about this felt safe. Nothing about this felt right. And as the man across from me leaned back, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle, I realized, this night was already spiraling into something I wasn't prepared for. Amused, he simply said, "Just to the other room. I'll be close by." Before I could protest further, he was gone, leaving me alone with a man whose presence seemed to pull all the air from the room. The silence between us was deafening, thick with an unspoken tension that made my skin prickle. I focused on the glass in my hands, my fingers gripping the cool surface as if anchoring myself, willing my racing heart to calm. "So," he said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, deliberate. "Tell me about yourself." I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze unrelenting. "What makes you tick? What you dream about? What excites you?" There was something beneath his words, something that made my stomach twist. Curiosity, yes, but also something darker, something predatory that lurked just beyond his smooth exterior. I shifted in my seat, forcing a polite smile. "There's not much to tell," I replied. "I'm pretty ordinary." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "There's nothing ordinary about you." The way he said it sent an uncomfortable shiver down my spine. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, asking about his work, his travels, anything to move the focus away from me. But no matter how hard I tried, he always found a way to bring it back, his questions prying, his eyes unwavering. As the minutes dragged on, the weight of his presence became suffocating. He leaned closer with every passing moment, his posture shifting, his words growing more pointed. The air between us thickened, pressing against my chest, making it harder to breathe. I wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, to call my husband back into the room, but I couldn't. I was trapped in a game I didn't understand, a game I had never agreed.